Welcome back to the 12 Laws of the Brain series by Medina, where we explore how the human brain is truly designed, operates, and influences our daily thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. In today's episode, we'll delve into a topic that's both familiar and highly debated: the differences between men and women. Not from a societal perspective, nor based on the common saying, men are from Mars, women are from Venus, but in the light of neuroscience and genetics. To begin this journey, I want to pose a simple yet profound question. Surely we've all wondered why men and women sometimes differ so much in their thinking and actions, right? Is it simply because society and culture have taught us that way? Or perhaps there's something even deeper, hidden within each person's brain? Today, we'll explore the answer and uncover the scientific mysteries behind the differences between male and female brains. To begin, let's start with a statement that might sound a little shocking. Men are sausages and women are devils. Sounds unbelievable, right? But this conclusion was drawn from a fascinating experiment on gender bias, and it will be the perfect starting point for our journey today. So, how did that experiment work? The researchers devised a fairly simple scenario. They divided the participants into 4 groups and asked them to evaluate the capabilities of a fictitious airline vice president. The key point here is that the gender and level of success of this vice president have a huge impact on how people perceive them. And here's the real thought-provoking result. The successful male vice president, he's both brilliant and friendly. But what about the superstar woman? She's equally capable, no one denies that, but she's labeled as a devilish, unpleasant, and unfriendly person. Clearly, the same level of success results in vastly different perceptions. This shows how deeply ingrained these invisible gender biases are in our subconscious. And that's why understanding the science behind it is so important. Okay, now let's begin this journey of discovery. Our first stop, our first island, is genetics. We're going to look at chromosomes, the things that make all the fundamental differences from the very first moments. Before we get to this part, I have a question for everyone. If males and females differ only by a tiny Y chromosome, why are the biological and behavioral differences so significant? Imagine this. The X chromosome is like a giant encyclopedia containing over 1,500 genes. Meanwhile, the Y chromosome is much smaller, with fewer than 100 genes. Its main role is like a tiny yet incredibly powerful switch on the male development program. And here's a fascinating biological fact. The default setting for a mammalian embryo, including humans, is female. That's right, we all essentially start out as girls. Only when a specific gene called SRY appears on the Y chromosome does it flip the switch, redirecting development to create a boy. In women, because they have 2 X chromosomes, their bodies have a very interesting mechanism. Cells randomly switch off one of the 2 X chromosomes. This creates what is called a genetic mosaic, incredibly complex, with a combination of active genes from both parents. So what's the key point here? This process makes women's bodies, genetically, much more complex. Meanwhile, men are simpler, operating on only a single X chromosome, and that X chromosome always comes from the mother. Based on that, you have the answer to the question. If men and women differ only by a tiny Y chromosome, why are the biological and behavioral differences so significant? The answer is because the Y chromosome doesn't just add a gene, it triggers a chain reaction of biological responses that alter the entire process of body and brain development right from the embryonic stage.
Okay, let's leave the genetic island for a moment and move on to our second stop. Inside the brain, we'll explore how these genetic differences shape the hardware in the male and female brains. Before we begin, I have a question for everyone. Are structural and chemical differences in the brain enough to determine how men and women think and feel on a daily basis? Let's look at the differences in brain chemistry for a moment. The charts reveal something quite surprising. Regarding serotonin, the chemical that regulates mood, Male brains produce it about 52% faster than female brains on average. Yes, over 50%. That's a significant number. Not only are there chemical differences, but brain structure also differs. For example, the amygdala, the center for processing strong emotions and memory, is significantly larger in men than in women. Based on that, you now have the answer to the question. Are structural and chemical differences in the brain enough to determine how men and women think and feel on a daily basis? The answer is not necessarily, because biology only creates initial tendencies, while life experiences and environment are what truly shape how the brain functions in reality. We see differences in structure and chemistry, but directly linking them to our daily behavior and experiences remains a great mystery. What does it really mean? And now, let's reach the final and most controversial island. Let's see how these internal brain differences might manifest externally in how we act and interact with others. Before we begin, I have a question for everyone. If men and women tend to process emotions differently, why is the same behavior praised in one gender but judged negatively in the other? A study by Larry Cahill revealed something very interesting. When faced with an extremely stressful situation, the brains of men and women use two different sides of the emotional center. What are the results? Men tend to remember only the main idea, the core of the event. Meanwhile, women tend to remember the specific details of that emotional event. These patterns begin very early. Researcher Deborah Tannen observed that boys often bond through doing something together, such as playing sports.
Woo!
Girls, on the other hand, bond through conversation, through sharing secrets with each other. This is also evident in how children develop leadership roles. Boys often use direct commands, do this, while girls tend to build consensus, let's do this. And this explains why an assertive girl is often labeled bossy, while a similarly assertive boy is seen as having leadership qualities. And here's a classic example of a misunderstanding between the sexes that many people have experienced. When she asks, "Are you different?" what she really meant was an opening, an invitation to start a conversation or a shared action. But he only heard it as a direct question and answered literally, "No." And that's where an argument can begin.
It's my turn now.
No, I am not giving it to you. You always do this.
Because you never...
Based on that, you now have the answer to the question. If men and women tend to process emotions differently, why is the same behavior praised in one gender but judged negatively in the other? The answer is that society often interprets behavior through gender stereotypes instead of understanding that these are simply different ways the brain processes information.
So we've covered 3 islands: genetics, brain structure, and behavior. So what? With all this knowledge, what can we do? How can we apply it in a fun way? Here's a great example from a 3rd grade class. A teacher tried dividing the class into separate groups for boys and girls for math, science, and literature to address different social dynamics. And the results were amazing. In just 2 weeks, the gap in academic achievement between the students had almost disappeared. Understanding these differences can bring immense recognition. At a Boeing training session, female executives were deeply moved. They said it was the first time in their careers that their tendency to process emotional details wasn't seen as a weakness, but rather as a different, valuable form of data processing. This brings immense significance to the work environment. Imagine the power of a team that can combine both perspectives. One grasping the main idea, seeing the whole picture, the other focusing on details, seeing each individual tree. Such a team would clearly have a huge strategic advantage. And this leaves us with one final question to ponder. Perhaps the goal isn't to eliminate differences. Instead, what if we truly understand, appreciate, and learn to harness the power of both viewpoints? Then we could create stronger teams, better classes, and far more understanding relationships.
Thank you for watching the video until the very end. Hopefully, after today's journey, we not only understand the differences between male and female brains better, but more importantly, we learn to appreciate different ways of thinking instead of hastily judging or labeling each other. Because science wasn't created to divide, but to help us understand each other better and live together more harmoniously. In the next video, which will be the final rule in the 12 Laws of the Brain series,
See you in the next video.